Imagine a bustling Boston street in 1919, suddenly engulfed by a 15-foot wall of dark molasses, rushing at 35 miles per hour. It's not a scene from a fantasy movie, but a real historical event that turned into a nightmare. This is the story of the Great Molasses Flood, a bizarre and devastating incident that remains one of the most unusual disasters in American history. In the heart of Boston's North End stood a massive tank, a behemoth in steel, owned by the United States Industrial Alcohol Company. Towering at 50 feet high and 90 feet in diameter, this colossal structure was no ordinary tank. It was designed to hold a staggering 2.3 million gallons of molasses, a sweet yet vital ingredient crucial for industrial alcohol, used in munitions manufacturing during World War I. But beneath the surface of this industrial giant, concerns simmered. For years before the disaster, the integrity of this mammoth tank was under scrutiny. Residents and workers in the North End whispered about leaks, often seen as trickles of molasses seeping through the steel walls. These signs, ominous and foreboding, were largely ignored or patched up superficially. In a troubling response, USIA even painted the tank a dark red, not to repair but to disguise the leaks. This negligence set the stage for a catastrophe. The tank, filled to near capacity, groaned under the pressure of its sweet contents. Its walls, weakened by poor construction and lack of maintenance, were a disaster waiting to happen. On January 15, 1919, as Boston experienced an uncharacteristically warm winter day, the stage was set for one of the most astonishing industrial accidents the city would ever witness. On that fateful day, the residents of Boston's North End went about their daily routines, unaware of the impending disaster. The clock struck 12:40 p.m., and within moments, an ordinary day transformed into an extraordinary catastrophe. A loud metallic roar shattered the mid-afternoon calm, a sound so alarming and unusual that it captured everyone's immediate attention. In an instant, the towering molasses tank, strained beyond its limits, ripped wide open. What followed was a surreal and terrifying spectacle, as 2.3 million gallons of dark brown molasses burst forth with an unstoppable force. Like a scene from a nightmare, a colossal wave of syrup 15 feet high cascaded over Commercial Street at an unimaginable speed of 35 miles per hour. The wave, dark and dense, was relentless in its path, obliterating everything in its wake. People, horses, buildings, and even the formidable steel supports of the elevated train platform. Among the chaos, personal tragedies unfolded. Anthony DiStasio, walking home with his sisters from school, was suddenly engulfed by the wave, tossed and turned as if surfing on the crest of this sticky tsunami. He was momentarily submerged in the molasses, unable to respond to his mother's calls, his throat clogged by the gooey substance. Miraculously, he survived, but not without enduring a traumatic ordeal. The destruction was immediate and overwhelming. Buildings crumbled as if made of paper, their structures no match for the immense force of the molasses. The Engine 31 firehouse was ripped from its foundation, its second story collapsing into the first. Nearby, the Cloverty family home was swept away, dashed against the elevated train platform. Martin Cloverty, trapped inside, miraculously managed to escape by floating atop his bed frame, using it as a raft in the sea of molasses. As the wave receded, it left behind a half-mile swath of destruction, a landscape of crushed buildings, crumpled bodies, and waist-deep muck. The scene was apocalyptic, a testament to the sheer force of what had just occurred. The once busy streets were now an eerie landscape of destruction, with buildings flattened and vehicles crushed under the weight of the sticky deluge. The area, stretching over half a mile, was unrecognizable, covered in a thick layer of molasses that trapped everything it had swept along. The human cost of this disaster was profound and heartbreaking. 21 lives were lost in the flood, a number that included workers, residents, and children. Among them were Maria DiStasio, a 10-year-old child who was suffocated by the molasses, and Pasquale Iantosca, another young victim tragically killed by the impact. Each name, each life lost, represented a personal story of dreams unfulfilled and families shattered. The injured numbered over 150, each bearing the physical and emotional scars of the calamity. The molasses did not discriminate in its path of ruin. Animals too fell victim to the flood. Horses, essential for transportation and work at the time, were caught in the sticky wave, many unable to escape, ultimately succumbing to the same fate as their human counterparts. The damage to Boston's infrastructure was significant. The powerful surge of molasses had managed to snap the steel supports of the elevated train platform, a testament to its tremendous force. Residential and commercial buildings within the flood's path faced similar fates, either completely destroyed or severely damaged, leaving a once vibrant neighborhood in ruins. In the aftermath, the streets of the North End were silent, save for the sounds of rescue efforts and the mourning of those who had lost so much. The Great Molasses Flood had not only changed the landscape of the city, but had also left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of the Boston community. In the face of this overwhelming catastrophe, acts of heroism and selfless bravery quickly emerged. First responders, despite the daunting and hazardous conditions, rushed into action. Boston's police, firefighters, and 100 sailors from the nearby Navy ship USS Nantucket were among the first on the scene. They were joined by 116 cadets under the direction of Lieutenant Commander H.J. Copeland from the USS Nantucket, a training ship of the Massachusetts Nautical School. These cadets, demonstrating extraordinary courage, plunged into the knee-deep molasses to rescue those trapped in the sticky deluge. The conditions for rescue were perilous. The molasses, initially fluid during the flood, began to thicken as it was exposed to the cold winter air, creating a quicksand-like trap that ensnared victims and complicated rescue efforts. The first responders fought against the clock and the increasingly viscous molasses to reach those who were still alive. One of the most dramatic rescues occurred at the Engine 31 firehouse, where several firefighters were trapped in a molasses-flooded pocket on the collapsed first floor. The rescue workers, in a desperate race against time and the hardening molasses, managed to free the survivors after several hours of painstaking efforts, cutting away floorboards and debris. Tragically, one firefighter lost his life in this struggle, succumbing to the molasses before he could be rescued. Over the following days, the rescue operation continued, with workers sifting through the ruins to find survivors and recover bodies. The task was grim. In some cases, horses trapped in the molasses had to be shot to end their suffering. The human toll of the disaster eventually climbed to 21 dead, with many bodies remaining missing for days. Some, like a wagon driver named Cesare Niccolo, were only recovered from the nearby Boston Harbor nearly 4 months after the flood. These efforts showcased the resilience and solidarity of the Boston community, as people from all walks of life came together to respond to an unprecedented disaster, turning a moment of immense tragedy into a testament to human courage and compassion. Once the immediate rescue efforts subsided, Boston faced the colossal task of cleaning up in the wake of the molasses disaster. The sticky residue covered everything within the half-mile destruction radius, creating a challenging and unprecedented cleanup scenario. The streets, buildings, and even the harbor were coated in a thick layer of molasses, turning the North End into a surreal, sticky landscape. The cleanup operation was massive in scale and required a coordinated effort from various groups. Firefighters, city workers, and volunteers converged on the site, armed with brooms, shovels, and other tools to tackle the daunting task. One of the most effective methods employed was using salt water, pumped from fireboats, to dissolve and wash away the molasses. Sand was also spread across the streets to absorb the syrup and assist in the cleaning process. This effort was not confined to the immediate area of the disaster. The impact of the molasses flood spread far beyond the North End. Rescue workers, cleanup crews, and even sightseers inadvertently carried molasses throughout the city. The sticky substance found its way onto subway platforms, inside trains and streetcars, onto public telephones, and into countless homes. Cleaning these areas required additional time and resources, stretching the effort over several weeks. The environmental impact was also significant. The molasses seeped into the soil and the waters of Boston Harbor, turning it brown until the summer. The sweet scent of molasses lingered in the North End for weeks, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had struck the community. The aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood was a period of recovery and reflection for Boston. While the physical scars eventually healed, the memories of the disaster and the lives lost remained etched in the city's history, a poignant reminder of the day Boston was swept by a wave of molasses. In the aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood, the legal and societal implications began to unfold. marking a significant moment in the history of corporate accountability and public safety regulations. The tragedy sparked a legal battle that would have far-reaching consequences. The United States Industrial Alcohol Company, USIA, which owned the faulty Molasses tank, faced intense scrutiny and public outrage. In response to the disaster, 119 residents filed a class action lawsuit against USIA, one of the first of its kind in Massachusetts. This legal action was a pioneering moment in the history of American law, setting a precedent for future corporate liability cases. The litigation was complex and protracted, stretching over several years. During the trial, more than 1,000 witnesses testified, and various experts, including explosives specialists and structural engineers, presented their findings. The case hinged on whether the tank's collapse was due to structural flaws or, as USIA claimed, sabotage by anarchists. After extensive hearings, the court-appointed auditor found USIA responsible for the disaster. The verdict was clear. The tank's failure was due to poor construction, lack of proper safety tests, and negligence on the part of the company. In 1925, USIA was ordered to pay $628,000 in damages to the victims and their families, a substantial sum for the time. This landmark case not only brought justice to the victims, but also led to significant changes in industrial safety standards and regulations. It underscored the importance of corporate responsibility and the need for stringent oversight in industrial operations, shaping the landscape of American industrial safety for future generations. The Great Molasses Flood, a catastrophe born from neglect and a stark reminder of the importance of safety in industrial operations, reshaped Boston and left an indelible mark on American history. It's a tale that intertwines human tragedy with lessons on responsibility and regulation. As we reflect on this unusual disaster, one can't help but wonder, what other unexpected lessons can history teach us about the importance of vigilance and accountability? Share your thoughts in the comments and have a lovely day.